Welcome to the debate. Imagine your boss knows exactly how many seconds you spent looking away from your computer screen today,
Yeah, that's a pretty terrifying thought.
right? Or imagine your employer effectively acts as your city mayor, basically regulating your gym, your meals, and even your dry cleaning.
Sounds completely dystopian.
It does, but honestly, it's just a standard Tuesday for millions of modern workers right now. Today, we're looking at a diagnostic landscape of modern work that is fundamentally dismantling traditional boundaries.
Exactly. We are talking about the radical changes reshaping the employer-employee relationship. Specifically, things like telecommuting, workplace campuses, the gig economy, and of course, the rise of robotics and artificial intelligence.
So, the central question we must untangle today is this. Do these emerging work patterns fundamentally empower employees through flexibility and innovation? Or do they introduce deeper vulnerabilities, erode boundaries, and mask new forms of employer control? I view these trends as positive. Technology-driven tools that actively enhance efficiency, promote workforce diversity, and offer genuine work-life balance when they are managed with clear policies.
And I approach these exact same trends with deep skepticism, arguing that they frequently strip away traditional employee benefits, radically expand managerial overreach into our private lives, and raise profound, unresolved questions about the future role of human beings in the workplace.
Okay, well, to set the stage here, we have to recognize that these alternative work patterns are a necessary and frankly highly beneficial evolution of the employment contract.
Beneficial for who, though?
For everyone, really. I mean, for over a century, the industrial factory and the corporate skyscraper cleanly but very rigidly separated our professional and personal lives. But that rigidity excluded huge swaths of the population.
Right.
Now the operational advantages of telecommuting are undeniable. For the firm, it drastically reduces total office space and operational costs. For society, it significantly lowers environmental impact by taking millions of daily commuters off the road.
Sure, on paper that looks great.
But most importantly, for the workforce, it decreases recruiting and training costs while driving higher worker retention. When you combine this spatial flexibility with temporal innovations like flex time and job sharing, you are actively helping companies recruit a much more diverse workforce.
I see what you're saying, but
You are allowing people who previously just couldn't fit into a strict 9-to-5 corporate structure to bring multiple, vital perspectives to complex problem solving. It's really a democratization of professional opportunity.
I come at it from a different way. Because while those operational efficiencies look fantastic on a corporate balance sheet, these structural shifts carry massive hidden costs that almost entirely transfer risk directly onto the worker.
How so?
Well, when we examine the actual mechanics of these trends, the biggest drawback to telecommuting isn't some technology failure. It is the bias that studies reveal in employer attitudes.
Ah, the out-of-sight bias.
Exactly. Out of sight often translates directly to out of mind for promotions and job security. Furthermore, when we look at the extremes of this flexibility, like the gig economy, it is explicitly defined by offering few or no benefits.
Well, we'll get into the gig economy in a bit.
Right. But even when companies try the reverse approach, bringing workers back into the physical fold through these massive workplace campuses, they end up blurring the line between professional and personal life entirely. They end up turning corporate managers into administrators of small city management functions. And hovering above all of this is the existential threat of automation and AI replacing human tasks altogether.
Okay, let's break this down. Let's start with that most immediate shift, which is moving the worker out of the office entirely through telecommuting.
Right.
I want to emphasize just how practical this is today, not just as a perk, but as a fully integrated workflow. We aren't just talking about, video calls anymore.
It's much more than that now.
Exactly. We are talking about asynchronous workflows where coworkers share massive files on remote network servers or collaborate on cloud documents in real time, regardless of their time zone. This technology completely removes geographic barriers to talent acquisition.
True. Geography matters less.
If a brilliant software engineer in rural Nebraska wants to work for a tech firm in Silicon Valley, she no longer has to uproot her family to do it. It facilitates increased efficiency and productivity, by stripping away the performative aspects of office life. You know, the commuting, the water cooler gossip, the endless physical meetings. It just allows the worker to focus strictly on output.
The elimination of a commute is great, certainly, but it does not resolve the deep psychological friction of remote work. If you are listening to this right now from your kitchen table, you likely know exactly what I mean.
Fair point.
There are critical drawbacks that cloud servers simply cannot fix. First, it is notoriously difficult to motivate remote employees when they are isolated from the organic energy of a team.
I mean, motivation is always a challenge.
Second, when you scatter your workforce across thousands of private home networks, securing company data becomes a logistical nightmare. Third, providing technical assistance when a worker's personal router fails is incredibly difficult for an off-site tech team.
Okay, but those are solvable IT issues.
But most importantly, and this is really the core issue here, it makes it deeply difficult for remote workers to maintain a work-life balance. When your kitchen table is your office, the physical walls that used to separate rest from labor are just gone. The laptop is always sitting there, pinging with notifications, demanding attention at all hours.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the failure to disconnect isn't a technological inevitability. It's a structural management issue.
A management issue?
Yes, the solution is already well documented. Managers simply need to set up a framework of policies to govern at-home work to ensure fairness.
But do they actually do that?
Good managers do. Workers maintain their professionalism by accomplishing a certain volume of work or completing set tasks by a certain time, rather than just being visually present from 9 to 5. If an employee is burning out because they feel pressured to answer emails at midnight, isn't that just a failure of management rather than a flaw in telecommuting itself?
I don't think you can separate the two so cleanly.
Why not? The technology didn't create the burnout. Bad managers who failed to establish and respect those policy frameworks did.
But have you considered the inherent contradiction in asking managers to regulate the private, domestic lives of their employees?
Regulate is a strong word.
It's what happens because managers lack traditional physical oversight. They often turn to non-traditional methods to monitor activity and performance. It is undeniably more difficult to monitor some kinds of work-related progress remotely.
Sure, assessing progress can be trickier.
Right. So that non-traditional monitoring often translates into digital surveillance. We are seeing the massive rise of bossware, software that tracks keystrokes, monitors idle time on the cloud network, and even randomly takes webcam photos to ensure the worker is at their screen.
Wow, yeah, that is extreme.
It is. The employer bias we discussed earlier stems precisely from this lack of physical visibility. If a manager cannot see you, they struggle to trust you, and their attempt to regain that trust via algorithmic surveillance violates the very autonomy that telecommuting supposedly offers. It creates this chilling effect where employees aren't engaging in deep thought. They're just vigorously moving their mouse to appear active.
Again, the isolation and digital surveillance of telecommuting are causing that much burnout. You would think bringing people back to the traditional office is the answer. But companies didn't just bring them back to isolated cubicles.
No, they certainly didn't.
We are seeing a massive historical precedent shifting away from separate workspaces toward highly integrated, open-plan environments. Some companies are completely redesigning the physical space into comprehensive workplace campuses.
Right, the mega campuses.
Yeah, these are shared, multi-purpose spaces where people gather informally throughout the day. In these flexible workplaces, employees actually spend less than 50% of their time at a desk.
Which sounds exhausting.
Well, this isn't about surveillance. It is an architectural overcorrection designed to augment productivity, collaboration, and brainstorming. Because employees are no longer walled off from one another, the physical space itself becomes a tool for spontaneous innovation.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go for it.
The open plan design is only the tip of the iceberg, and honestly, it is largely a cost-saving measure dressed up as collaboration. But the real issue is how these campuses expand to include restaurants, recreation facilities, health clinics, and all of these convenient amenities.
Which people love.
But it creates an all-encompassing aspect to the workplace that is deeply problematic. It greatly expands a manager's job description to include what are essentially small city management functions.
Small city management?
Yes. Suddenly, an HR director isn't just dealing with payroll.
They are dealing with municipal city planning, zoning regulations for the corporate shuttle, and public health guidelines for the company gym. When the company provides your food, your gym, your dry cleaning, and your social space, they aren't just facilitating collaboration. They are engineering an environment where you literally never have a reason to leave. It is a velvet cage.
Let me give you a different perspective on that using an analogy. Think about a traditional university campus.
Okay.
A university provides dining halls, fitness centers, and medical clinics not to trap the students maliciously, but to free them from the mundane, time-consuming chores of daily life.
Right. To focus on school.
Exactly. The goal is to let them dedicate their full cognitive energy to learning and research. Similarly, corporate campuses provide these amenities to free employees from the stress of fighting traffic to grab lunch or rushing out at 5 to make it to the dry cleaners. It allows them to focus entirely on innovation.
But a workplace isn't a school.
The principle is the same. Efforts to offer an ever-widening array of amenities appear to be a direct effort by employers to create more desirable places of employment in a highly competitive talent market. It's a massive financial investment in the employee's holistic well-being.
The university analogy is fascinating, but it fundamentally breaks down when you examine the underlying power dynamics.
How so?
A university student is paying the institution for an education. They are the client. An employee is a subordinate being paid for their labor. When a corporate entity takes on small city management functions, they absorb civic power over their workforce without any democratic oversight.
I mean, employees can still leave.
Can they? If you rely on your employer for your recreation, your meals, your healthcare, and your entire social ecosystem, your ability to advocate for yourself, to push back against unreasonable demands, or simply to resign becomes exponentially more difficult. The work-life balance isn't improved. It is completely obliterated because life has been totally subsumed by work.
I hear that concern, but I think we have to look beyond just the physical spaces, whether that's a campus or a home office, and examine how the structural employment contract itself is changing.
Right, the actual nature of the work.
Exactly. There is significant momentum behind alternatives to traditional patterns of work, which directly addresses this need for autonomy. Consider job sharing, where 2 or more employees perform the work of one full-time position.
Yeah, that's an interesting model.
They are essentially engaging in part-time work that covers a full-time workload. This allows employers to meet employees' need for work-life balance while bringing more than one person's perspective to problem solving. Or look at flex time, which lets employees choose their own start and finish times, completely bypassing the rigid 9-to-5 workday. These are structural organizational changes that explicitly empower the worker to dictate their own terms of engagement.
They do dictate their own terms in job sharing and flex time, assuming those are undertaken with equity.
Which they should be.
But we cannot discuss flexible work patterns without examining the much darker, much more prevalent side of this flexibility, and that is the access economy or the online platform economy. We are talking about the gig economy.
Ah, yes.
This is defined explicitly as an environment in which individuals and businesses contract with independent workers for the completion of short-term assignments, engagements, or projects, offering few or no benefits. You mentioned empowerment earlier, but the access economy is essentially just a resource circulation system.
But it gives people options.
Consumers participate on both sides as providers and obtainers of resources. When you reduce human labor to a circulating resource via a digital platform, the worker bears all the vulnerability. Think of it like a casino. The algorithmic management creates an environment where the house always wins.
That's a bit pessimistic, isn't it?
It's the reality. The algorithm acts as a dispatcher that doesn't negotiate, doesn't care if you're sick, and dictates your livelihood based on an opaque 5-star rating system. You have perfect autonomy, sure, but zero power.
Okay, I acknowledge the vulnerability inherent in the gig model, but we also have to recognize the immense democratization it brings.
Democratization?
Yes, the online platform economy radically lowers the barrier to entry for millions of people who need immediate, flexible income that traditional patterns of work simply deny them because of rigid schedules or geographic limitations.
But at what cost?
Yes, they operate as independent contractors, but it is a conscious trade-off between traditional security and absolute unparalleled flexibility. For a student needing extra cash, or a parent who can only work 3 random hours a day, the gig economy provides a lifeline.
But is it a fair trade? I mean, if an entire business model relies on the internet to facilitate transactions that deliberately circumvent labor laws, minimum wage requirements, and employer obligations, we are just using new technology to mask very old forms of labor exploitation.
I wouldn't call it exploitation if it's a voluntary contract.
The gig worker isn't an empowered entrepreneur. They are a contingency plan for a corporation looking to shed its obligations to provide a social safety net, like healthcare or retirement.
Well, that brings us to the ultimate contingency plan, and perhaps the most radical restructuring of the workforce possible.
Right.
Removing the human worker from the equation entirely. We are entering the era of robotics and artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And robotics must be defined incredibly specifically here. It is a field of research including computer science, mechanical and electronics engineering, and science processes, with the exclusive objective to produce robots or related forms of automation to replicate human tasks.
Keyword being replicate.
Replicate, not assist. This comes with a massive host of legal and societal issues. The fear of losing jobs is a very present reality. The ultimate question we have to ask is where humans will fit in the workplace of tomorrow.
It is the big question.
When a machine can replicate the cognitive and physical tasks of a worker, without requiring flex time, without needing a workplace campus, and without suffering from employer bias, the human worker becomes structurally obsolete.
I hear that fear, and it is a valid reality. But we cannot look at artificial intelligence purely as a terminal threat. It is also accompanied by incredible intrigue about what the future holds.
Intrigue doesn't pay the rent, though.
True, but it is an unprecedented tool for human advancement. The answer isn't to artificially halt technological progress or just ban AI outright. The solution is adaptation. Companies must help workers retrain to become part of that future workforce.
Retraining is easier said than done.
But if we implement proper training programs, we can elevate human workers out of repetitive, automatable tasks. We can move them into roles that require the uniquely human elements that machines cannot replicate. Things like empathy, complex moral reasoning, creative strategy, and nuanced leadership.
That assumes a level of corporate benevolence that our discussion of the gig economy proves is largely absent.
I think companies will realize they need human leadership.
But if a company won't even provide basic benefits to a human delivering their groceries or coding their short-term projects, why would we trust them to invest heavily in retraining a workforce that they just spent billions of dollars developing AI to replace?
It's an investment in their own future.
It's like rebuilding an airplane while it's flying, but voluntarily leaving the passengers behind. We have to look carefully at how future workforce demographics may be affected by these existing and emerging technologies. The transition is not going to be seamless, and leaving it up to corporations to self-regulate the retraining of humanity is a tremendous gamble.
Well, this leads us perfectly into summarizing our positions because that friction is exactly where the theoretical rubber meets the operational road.
Agreed.
My view remains that these changing work environments, whether facilitated by the telecommuting toolkit of cloud networks, the highly collaborative and amenity-rich spaces of workplace campuses, or the integration of AI, they all offer unprecedented opportunities.
Right.
They allow for massive gains in efficiency, a reduction in environmental impact, and a highly customized work-life balance through flex time and job sharing. Technology is giving us the tools to break out of the rigid office-bound paradigm and create a more diverse, flexible future, provided companies invest in their people and manage these tools properly.
And my stance remains that without immense caution and regulatory oversight, these trends simply package old exploitation in new high-tech formats.
We definitely see it differently there.
We do. The gig economy strips away hard-won worker benefits under the guise of an access economy. Workplace campuses threaten to absorb the employee's entire life into the corporate ecosystem, blurring boundaries to the point of total managerial overreach. And the employer bias inherently present in telecommuting shows that traditional power dynamics are still very much in play. If we are replacing human tasks with robotics, we are facing an existential shift that requires far more than just optimistic intrigue. It requires structural protection.
Despite our deep differences on the outcomes, we do actually arrive at a strong point of convergence here.
I think we do.
Whether a company is implementing flex time, managing remote telecommuters, building out a multi-purpose campus, or navigating the integration of artificial intelligence, there is a fundamental operational necessity. Employers must clearly spell out expectations and procedures for each employee to ensure success.
Yes, absolutely.
The future relies entirely on that clarity and equity in establishing the ground rules of the new employment contract.
I agree completely. Whether the management happens through a cloud server algorithm or across an open plan campus, the ambiguity of expectations is where violations thrive. When traditional boundaries are dissolved by technology, new boundaries must be explicitly drafted by policy.
Which brings us back to the question that opened our discussion today, and the thought we want to leave you all with. What are ethics of the future going to look like?
It's a huge question.
At the beginning of our show, we talked about the architecture of work, how the physical walls of the factory used to define the boundaries of our professional lives. Well, those walls are gone, replaced by cloud servers, gig platform algorithms, and campus ecosystems. As you look at your own workplace demographics, you have to ask yourself, in a world without walls, are we building bridges to a more flexible, empowered future, or are we just designing invisible cages?
That is the defining question for the modern worker.
Thank you for joining us. We will leave you to weigh the evidence and draw your own conclusions about the future of work.